Hello everybody, so my name's Nicola. I did used to be BT's futurologist, which, before you say anything, yes, that is a very silly job title, and always comes with the same question, which I can feel emanating at me, which is, do I have a crystal ball? Well, the answer to that question is yes, I do. Sadly, I saw no future in it, so they're a bit rubbish, crystal balls, overrated, I think. But if I did spend my entire day looking at crystal balls or tea leaves, that would be a very boring job. Now, admittedly, my job title is a lot more boring than it used to be. So I'm a principal innovation partner with BT. I'm part of BT's innovation team. So those of you who know BT will know places like Adastral Park, which is our main research and innovation centre. I live very close to there, so I spend a lot of time not looking at crystal balls, but talking to incredibly clever people, some of whom know a lot about things like quantum key cryptography and quantum. It's all a bit quantum, so I get to talk to them. I also get to ask some very silly questions because I always say I'm only half a technologist, and I'm never terribly sure which half, whether it's the slightly boring bottom half or the top half that looks as if I forgot the sleeves in my jacket. But whichever half it isn't, I'm a psychologist by background, so I always claim I look at the most disruptive part of innovation, which is, of course, not the technology at all. It's us, because unless we use it and adopt it to change the ways that we work, rest and play, it's, again, a bit rubbish. So my role is to understand really how people are using technology, why people might adopt technology, and what the implications are for strategy. And I do this on the two human elements, I guess. One is around customer experience, which I'm mostly going to talk about this morning. I also look at employee experience and the future of work as well, which I'm not going to talk about today. I have to say customer experience probably is my favourite, mainly because I am incredibly geeky about things like contact centres. We've already talked a bit about that this morning, but I did my PhD on contact centres. I am that sad. So I looked at advisor motivation, and I agree. I don't want to call agents because we're calling AI agents now. So that's very confusing for a start. So our agents are now advisors or experts or people, basically, that are adding that human dimension in a very digital world. So what I'm going to talk about today is mainly a piece of work that we have done for a number of years. It's called the Autonomous Customer. This is a lovely piece of research for a data geek like me, because we've been doing it for a very long time. We started doing this research back in 2010. And it's research that's really trying to get the finger on the pulse, I guess, on what customers are thinking about customer experiences, what channels they're using, why they are using those channels, what their frustrations are. And we do ask a lot about innovation as well, just to get a feeling from customers as to how they're feeling around innovations like AI, for example. So we've done it typically every 2 years. The research I'm going to show today is actually, it's getting towards the end of its shelf life, to be honest. So we published it in June last year. We're due to do another piece of research next year. I'm keeping my fingers crossed that we're going to have budgets to do it, but it's also global. So we tend to have it's panel research. So we tend to have a group of customers. What we try and make representative of the population as a whole. So they're not any particular customers. They are just customers who are doing stuff as customers around the world. I'm going to mostly talk about global averages. I will pull out some UK specific data because the UK generally is around global average on most of this, but there are some quirky things. And the other thing is I've got UK data since 2010, so I can compare and contrast quite nicely across the years. So let's give a little bit of a flavour as to what we're finding. Well, the first thing to say is, yes, customer expectations around services, I mean, they're not necessarily going up. I think there is some evidence that they might be, but generally people expect good customer experiences now. It's kind of a hygiene factor. Wow doesn't wow anymore. I think that's one of the problems. And certainly the Institute of Customer Service recently published some research showing that actually customer satisfaction with customer experience is the lowest since 2015. So we're not necessarily doing very well in terms of delivering on those already very high expectations. One thing that really comes out from the research is that And from a behavioural science perspective, this is not a surprise because fundamentally we are incredibly lazy creatures. And one thing that really does determine our behaviours is how easy things are to do. And we get this echoed in the data. So there's a lot around make it easy for me to contact you, make it easy for me to deal with you, convenience. Convenience and price one's an interesting one because it often ebbs and flows with the economy. And yet, although we did this research last year where the economy was not particularly good around the world, we're still seeing convenience trump price. So people are looking for easy, convenient experiences. They want low effort. And in a digital customer experience space, they expect low effort. And again, one of the problems with the digital experience that I think is probably taking that customer expectation, well, maybe the actual experience of customer experience is being taken down by the fact that digital experiences aren't always delivering. So easy is one of those things that we've really looked at over the years because it's always come out in the data. Make it easy for me. Now, I'm an academic. I like defining things like easy, and I don't do my work alone. I've over the many years I've been working in this arena. I think I started when I was 6, but I've been working with Professor Moira Clark. I'm actually working with her at the moment on the European Contact Centre and Customer Service Awards, where she is the head judge. I am merely one of the judges, but Moira has been working in this space for a very long time as well. And we worked with her to try and sort of define, well, particularly if we're looking at innovation and customer experience, the one thing we want to do is take the effort down, not make it more effort to do things. So if we can start to define what effort is, we can start to then go, is this innovation going to work? So Moira defines effort as there's 4 components to it. And I would say the first 3 components is about that comprises about 20% of someone's perception of effort. And the rest of it, the 80%, is all about how do we feel about stuff. And we've just had a session on empathy. So, definitely that's probably the overriding factor of what I feel and actually colours the rest of the things I'm going to talk about. So the first thing to say is cognitive effort. Lots and lots of talk at the moment around cognitive effort and how hard my brain is working to do stuff. Because again, my brain is quite lazy too. And my brain, although it's brilliant, has its limits. And I think that picture actually is a very good representation of me about 3 weeks ago trying to buy jeans. Now, conceptually, jeans are simple, aren't they? But then you get in shops the bewildering number of cuts and colours and all sorts of things. Who knew mom cut was a thing? I mean, I have no idea what that is, to be perfectly honest. So I love choice, but too much choice just makes my brain go soggy. So I'm standing there going, I don't know, I'm just going to walk out and have a bit of a cry because I thought jeans were going to be simple. So what can we do from an innovation space, not just on jeans, but obviously we have a lot of choices. How can we bound those choices and make those choices more relevant? Well, personalisation is out there to help us do that. And obviously Amazon, who has infinite amounts of choice, are very good at doing that. So they actually learn a lot from you and then personalise those choices and cut those choices down so that you don't get every choice in the universe. Then, of course, there's choice of language as well. We often overcomplicate things, particularly in the telecoms industry, not just telecoms, legal industry as well, and also, well, a lot of industries are quite technically geeky in their language. So let's not confuse customers by using weird language. So let's make sure that we talk the same language our customers do, enabled so that they don't have to make their brains work so hard. So that's cognitive effort. The second one is time effort. Now, this is probably more obvious, and it's often about queuing. And oddly enough, queuing, I mean, we're quite comfortable as British people about queuing. We have a whole kind of rituals and rules about it. But queuing's gone digital now. Certainly any of you who tried to buy Oasis tickets a couple of months ago will have experienced probably quite long digital queues. So queuing is an interesting one. We've been working with a professor over at MIT who we've nicknamed Professor Q, not because he's an X-Man or a superhero, although that would be cool, but because he looks at queues and he looks at the psychology of queuing. And weirdly enough, actual time in a queue is not necessarily real time in a queue. It's all a bit wibbly wobbly timey wimey, to use a Doctor Who phrase. So can we do things to manipulate people's perception of time in a queue? Now, the best company to do this, Disney are getting a lot of mentions today, but Disney are brilliant at this, because if you go to a Disney park and I ask you at the end of the day, how was it? You'll talk really excitedly, hopefully, about the rides and the experience. But actually, you spent about 70% of your time queuing. You just did not notice because they are very good at distracting you. So can we, as an industry, start to maybe wibbly-wobbly, timey-wimey queuing in both the contact space and also the digital space? Then physical effort. Again, this doesn't always apply to every industry, but I love that picture. But this is simply around, do I have to go somewhere? Where's the parking? How far do I have to walk? Is it heavy? All of those are factors that are going to make us decide whether we want to do this or not. But as I said, all of those things are then coloured by how do I feel about this. Now, I saw the story about the limiting the hugs at a New Zealand airport the other day and thought, that's going to make me feel really, really not nice. Okay, you can have a hug, but you're only allowed 3 minutes. So again, how does this make me feel? And that's going to colour absolutely everything else because we are emotive creatures. So we need to figure out how customers are feeling because it really does shape our behaviours. More on that in a minute. Now, of course, in a digital world, one of the other things that often we've done as organisations is push everything into the digital space because, frankly, we don't want people to call us because it's expensive. So we've pushed everything into a digital world. The trouble is we haven't necessarily brought everyone along with us. And it's great judging the European Contact Centre and Customer Service Awards that we now have a category purely on vulnerable customers because I think people have recognised that not everyone can cope with a digital-only experience. Now, what we found in the data is basically what we've created is effectively a shadow customer or customers behind the customer. Now, I'm one of these. I have an 86-year-old mother who has every means to get online, and she's got phone, she's got apps. She has none of the confidence though. So basically, I am my mother online. I probably shouldn't be my mother online because I am effectively, I've got all her passwords. I am pretending to be her. But she can't do it. She cannot physically do it. So this is a trend we really do need to pay attention to because vulnerable customers aren't going to go away. We're probably not going to suddenly make them digitally literate. And we do need to recognise that sometimes there are customers behind those customers who are trying to sort through and make things easier for customers that are particularly vulnerable. So again, we need to think about this in design. This is my favourite slide. It's a graph. I love a good graph, but this is UK data throughout all of the iterations of the research. And it's fascinating data because it's all about how are channel choices evolving through the years. So we asked the customers, what channels do you choose when you want to contact an organisation? Now, the first thing to say with this graph is the more channels you put in, the more channels customers will use. So frankly, the wrong decision is to probably put every channel in the universe in, not least because it costs money to support every channel in the universe, and you then get costs spread very thin across multiple channels. So don't put every channel in. Try and figure out what channels are easy for you, but what channels are easy for your customers, and you can then get a win-win. If it's tipped one way or another, you're not going to get good channel responses. The second comment is, particularly when we look at the older channels and the frankly unsexy channels like the phone and email, they are still standing up. The phone looked as if it was down and out. It was going down, and we hit, I think it was about 2017, we thought the phone's dead, it's not going to be used anymore. And then suddenly it went back up and we're kind of, what's going on? What's going on? And what we think is going on, and obviously causation and correlation in a statistical world are an interesting debate, but we can start to see the rise of channels like web chat at the same time. So web chat, I used to do a lot of business cases for web chat. It seems to make sense because you can have one advisor on multiple sessions. I've seen up to 10 multiple chat sessions, do not recommend that. But basically the economics are about concurrency. The trouble is that makes a terrible conversation because as a customer that the advisor is probably talking to about 4 other people and then sometimes it drops out randomly, so it's not a good customer experience. What happens if it's not a good customer experience? People channel switch, and often what happens with digital channels is people get very frustrated with digital channels and they go, I'm going to have to ring them. So we get this rebound effect around the phone. So what we're finding at the moment is still about 2/3 of average contacts is via phone. And despite the fact we've put a lot of automation in, because the phone is very good at dealing with complexity and emotiveness. However, it's also picking up the rubbish from other channels. So we've got to really look at, well, investing in the phone, but trying to use automation to appropriately take contact away from expensive channels like the phone. So I could go on for hours about this graph. I won't, because we don't have hours, but it's really interesting about the channels. But to be honest, the more interesting question from a psychological perspective is, why are we doing this? Why do we use one channel over another? And we've done loads of interviews over the years, and it's quite interesting. You ask customers specifically about channels and they go, don't really care about channel. I've got a problem, I've got a goal. I want to achieve something. That's what they're interested in. Now, underlying that goal is emotion. I said this is an emotional business. It's the emotion that tends to guide us as to which channel we're going to use. And what we've typically found after loads of interviews is customers are in one of three emotional states. They're either positive, they're negative, or they are neutral. And regardless of age or demographic, that is often what guides us to the channels we choose. So visionary customers, let's start with the positive ones. They have a positive goal. They want to do this. So they might be getting married. They might be planning a holiday. They might be buying a house. So they're willing to invest time, energy, and effort into doing this. And they will use lots of channels. They can be a bit paranoid. Certainly in retail, we tend to get things like Christmas. Christmas is I call it parcel paranoia for Christmas, because you've got a deadline and you've bought something online and you're kind of looking at it, is it going to get there on time? Yeah, please tell me it's going to get there on time. So that kind of behaviour can tip you from positive to negative. But generally, if you can keep people positive, they're really nice customers to have. The trouble is they don't stay positive, or they can start negative, and we call these customers in crisis. We've all been there. We've got annoyed, we've got frustrated. Now, interestingly, the chemistry of the brain starts to change at this point. Rationality, logic, rationality out of the window. Cannot be logical as a customer in crisis at the peak of crisis. From a design perspective, the real challenge is my short-term memory capacity goes down by about 50%. Now, I used to, for my sins, design IVRs, those lovely press 1s and press 2s that everyone absolutely hates. Now, firstly, I apologise. Secondly, I try and design good ones, because we try and design them, particularly if you're pressing buttons, to accommodate short-term memory capacity, and it's thought to be between 7 and 9 bits. It's been disputed, but 7 and 9 bits is generally the guidance. So if I'm designing push 1, it's press 1 for this, that's 2 bits. Press 2 for that, press 3 for that. I'm hitting up against short-term memory capacity. When I'm calm, now I'm really angry or frustrated and my short-term memory capacity halves. So we get to the point where it's press 1 for this, press 2 for... I can't remember what 1's for now. So instantly we start to see that we can't put loads of complex information in front of somebody in crisis. I work with the police a lot. And you know, that's an extreme example of people are seriously in crisis there. You cannot put 52 options on an IVR. You can't put lots of complicated material in front of them and expect them to read it. You can't expect, if your house is on fire, probably you're not going to email the fire brigade. So instantly what you find is customers in crisis do look for phone numbers, because they want to ring you and they want a conversation. They want reassurance. So they are very difficult to deflect off the phone channel. And obviously that makes your advisor's life really difficult, because they get loads of customers in crisis, because it's very difficult to automate them out. So again, we need to look after our advisors, because there's a knock-on effect to that, to them having to deal with immense amounts of crisis behaviour and immense amounts of negative emotion. Now, we're not always positive or negative. There is a midpoint. We call it utilitarians. Now, utilitarians are just doing routine stuff. I am paying my bills, I'm buying carrots, I don't need wow. I just want it to be quick and I want it to be easy. So we can start to see that maybe some of the self-service technologies are much more appropriate. in that realm if we can make sure we keep customers in the easy mode and don't shift them either positive or negative. Now, what we've done with this is effectively start to create different customer journeys. So first thing to say is, if we can figure out where people are on this spectrum, we can start to maybe dynamically signpost them to the channel that they are most likely to want to use, the most appropriate channel. So again, we can start to, if we got data about the customer, what can we do with that data? Can we apply machine learning? Can we make this a much, much easier choice for the customer? Of course, one classic example of crisis behaviour is when we've had fraud done on us. And again, in the digital space, it's really difficult now to detect whether things are real or not. So things like, certainly we were looking at biometrics. We still do look at biometrics a lot in the innovation space around, okay, rather than having to remember my passwords, can I just present any part of my body to my phone? And actually that means, yes, I'm authenticated. Great, because I don't tend to forget my face. I do forget my passwords. But we're also getting in the rich messaging area, authentication. So one of the things around text. So if you're a parcel company, you get a lot of fraud. But if you've got a little a tick to say, yeah, I'm a legitimate company, again, we can start to say, okay, brilliant. I have some confidence that this is not fraud, because it's very difficult to deal with fraud these days. And certainly we're doing a lot around fraud in BT at the moment. The other thing that really people hate when they're in crisis mode is well, pleasantries like this. Your call is important to us. Again, this is about queue management. And interestingly, the stats now, because we get this so much whenever we particularly pick up the phone, bearing in mind we pick up the phone, usually wanting to speak to somebody, we get this. And to be honest, firstly, we don't believe it. And secondly, this just is interpreted as they can't staff their contact centre properly. So again, this is a lot to do with how do we manage those queues, and maybe don't put messages that basically aren't empathetic. What can we put that's useful, that maybe can do that wibbly wobbly, timey-wimey stuff I was talking about earlier. Now, there are channels I think show promise. Now, chat is an interesting one. I talked about web chat earlier. That's a synchronous chat channel. I think we are seeing a big pickup at the moment around asynchronous chat channels. And WhatsApp is a very prime example. We are doing a lot on WhatsApp with a lot of companies at the moment. And that gives you a little bit more of a leeway, because you don't expect it to be entirely a real-time conversation. So that does not give you the excuse to maybe leave it half a day to respond, as a parcel delivery company once did with me. They said, WhatsApp's the fastest. Right, I tried the phone, because obviously we all tried channels, parcel paranoia going on here. So I tried WhatsApp. I think I WhatsApped them at 3 in the afternoon, and I got a reply 10 o'clock the next morning. That's not acceptable. But at least with asynchronous chats, there are a lot of advantages here. We can resource it better, maybe into the contact centre, but also we get things that customers say that they want, things like a record of the conversation. Now, of course, chats, like any channel, you can put automation in front of, and obviously a lot of talk is about chatbots at the moment, and we're going to probably be talking about that for most of the day. Now, I always have this thing around chatbots and cobots. I actually think cobots are more exciting, but let's go on chatbots. Chatbots, if implemented really well, can be brilliant, because they'll take away that non-value contact from the phone. However, if you implement it in the wrong part of the journey and get that chatbot experience that we've probably all had around, I don't understand what you want, or I can't help you, and then I get cut off. I then have to change channels and then start all over again. That is an incredibly bad customer experience. And what we are finding from the data is 70% of our autonomous customers are saying that can destroy your brand. So we can see some very high profile brand destruction going on, particularly when we get into the generative AI space. And I keep saying generative AI is really interesting because it's a really good conversationalist, but it needs so many guardrails around it, because it does have this nasty tendency to hallucinate. So from the game parcel delivery chatbot that started running down its own brand, right the way through to Air Canada's chatbot that promised a customer a refund that did not exist. Obviously, then the customer took Air Canada to court, and Air Canada tried, interestingly, to claim that the chatbot wasn't a recognised legal entity of Air Canada. I have to say the judge at that point just laughed. So I think we're going to get quite a lot of that if maybe we just unleash generative AI as a great conversational tool. I think the good examples of this, and I'm again mentioning the European Contact Centre and Customer Service Awards, I'm judging the AI category, and there have been some really interesting examples of, let's have the generative AI as a layer, but let's make sure that we put a lot of guardrails around it so that it does not hallucinate and it does not promise customers things it can't do. Now, that has an interesting effect because obviously we put a lot of AI in to try and take away full-time employees from that front line. Actually, what we're seeing is those frontline employees are being moved out to quality assurance instead. So you're not necessarily saving a lot of FTE, you're just shifting the effort. So I think chatbots are interesting, but I do think cobots are a lot more effective. And again, we're seeing this in the entries for the awards. So this is effectively having your advisors with a little kind of guide. I would say co-pilot, but Microsoft pinched that. But a little guide, because frankly, again, our advisors are getting the complexity, they're getting the emotiveness, and a typical contact center advisor is often having to interact with multiple processes, multiple systems. We can't update their brains all the time. Their job is becoming a lot more difficult. And the problem is that their cognitive effort then goes on the systems and the processes rather than necessarily the customer. And it's the customer they should be listening to and empathizing with. So I think what we're starting to see now are these cobots, agentic AI, basically managing the process, the back-end process bit and the systems bit, so that then the advisors can pay attention to the customer. Great example, if the AI can listen to the conversation, it can make notes about the conversation rather than the advisor having to type up those notes. What it can then do is summarize those notes, send it to the advisor. They can just, rather than sitting in wrap for a long time, just look at the notes and approve or disprove them, and obviously, augment them if they want to. That saves a tremendous amount of time and again enables your advisors to concentrate on the customer rather than necessarily the notes that they need to make for the back-end system. And also advisors are very variable. I mean, some people write an essay, some people write one sentence, and sometimes the written English is not great either. So we can start to standardize what goes into the back-end systems, which is valuable because again, we're actioning a lot of the stuff that goes into the back-end system. So I think the cobot piece is far, far more interesting at the moment than necessarily the chatbot. The final thing I want to talk about is proactive contact. Now, this is an interesting one because there's a dimension here around learning stuff about the customer, so that's personalization. But then what do we do with that? Can we start to push demand out using machine learning? The answer is probably yes. So the trick is to figure out what's the incoming demand likely to be? What's the customer going to tell us about? And can we tell the customer that before they contact us? So we need to figure out what's the right message, what's the right channel, and what's the right time. If we get this wrong, I always like to use human analogies. If I'm walking, following you along the street and continuously tapping you on the shoulder going, did you know? After about the 12th time, I'm probably going to turn around and punch you. So if we look at the digital equivalent of punch, which I call GDPR, we're basically going to go, you are just getting annoying now. Please stop sending me messages. So we have choices here. And I think this is particularly interesting as we get more and more data about the customer. What is the appropriate data to push out? A certain airline has been, at one point, kept telling me my plane was likely to be late, and then it wasn't. It's kind of, well, don't do that because you're just distressing me and making me anxious, and actually I didn't need to be. So again, let's stop doing that. So we can go personalised, we can then go proactive and push demand out. The third step is, of course, predictive. Now in this area, particularly as we've got loads of information, we've got smart everything, we've got edge compute, we've got IoT, we can tell an awful lot about the customer now. The problem is there's a very, very thin line between a butler and a stalker. If we get a bit stalkery, again, it's kind of, whoa, no, you know way too much about me. I'm not sure I'm comfortable with this. Let's just not do this anymore. Interestingly, one utility company started to itemize energy bills based on what you were doing in your house. quite a few people decided that that was a little bit creepy and either switched energy provider or said, well, don't do that anymore. I just don't want an itemized bill. So again, we need to figure this out. And that's why actually that human piece is really important, because we are not rational beings. We do want an easy life. So if we can use this kind of technology to create an easy life for our customers, they will embrace it. But if we then become incredibly creepy and stalkery, the result largely is, nope, don't like you anymore, I'm going to turn this off. And to be honest, machine learning does not work by magic. AI is based on data, and if we don't have the right data and good data, it's fairly useless. So that's kind of a summary of the stuff that we've been finding in the autonomous customer. I'm going to finish on that one, because otherwise I'll overstay my time. But if you are interested in the data, certainly if you're having trouble sleeping, I can help. Please do ping me. We're always happy to share the data with you. Obviously we'll show the presentation as well, but thank you very much.